Welcome to the Powerful Panels podcast. This is Kristin Arnold, and I am a professional panel moderator on a quest to make all panel discussions lively and informative. And today I am so excited to introduce Jennifer Spear and Michael Kerr in that they did an awesome panel at the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers convention a few months ago. Let's just leave it at that, right? A few months ago. And I was like, oh, this is a really fascinating format in that it was called the he said, she said discussion. And so literally Michael was moderating the panel. If I got that right, Michael?
That's right.
That's right. He was moderating the panel. Jennifer and Michael organized this panel. They are the brains behind it. So I'm so excited to have them here. But basically what they did is they took a topic, several questions, topics that they thought were pretty debatable in our industry. And they had one person, a he, and one person, a she. He said, she said, that they are humorists, but also very well accomplished in our industry. And so Michael would throw a question in the middle and the two of them would banter it about. So that was a very interesting panel kind of concept. So I'd really like to delve into where did you pull that out of? What prompted you to want to do a he said, she said kind of segment?
Yeah. Do you want me to start, Jennifer?
Well, we may remember it differently, Michael. So
we may. So why don't you go first? Ladies first.
Well,
she said.
She said. Yeah, she said first.
So Michael and I were working on planning the whole convention and thinking about all the different types of topics and speakers and thinking about the business overall. And I remember having a conversation early on saying that there are some things that a man can say from the stage that maybe a woman can't. And then there's things that a woman could say that a man could never say from the stage. And so that started the kind of discussion around he said, she said, but then it continued to morph. Michael, do you remember it differently?
No, that's exactly how I remember. No, that was kind of the impetus for the fodder for an interesting conversation, for an interesting and possibly controversial topic to talk about on the main stage. So then I think that evolved from that idea to, well, how could we do that? So coming up with this idea for the panel, which was kind of based on it was a bit of a combo of two ideas. I actually saw a he said, she said panel done in our association about 15 years ago, just at one of our chapter meetings. And it was very simple, but it was really effective. Everybody loved it. All they did was they had a flip chart in the front of the room. They had a whole whack of different topics in the speaking industry, not necessarily controversial. In fact, most of them weren't, but they decided ahead of time, the she and the he in this case, to take opposing perspectives on each of the topics and to show the audience that all of these topics, there's no right answer. There's different ways of running your business. There's different ways of doing all of these different things. And it was very lively and fast paced. So it partly came out of that, but also one of the many ideas we had for this convention was to play around with a show called The Debaters on radio, on CBC Radio in Canada. There's a very fun, popular show where comedians debate topics and they score these, kind of fake points for making points, but in a very humorous way. So it's a debate, but it's quite a funny debate. So we kind of married those two ideas. And we thought if we could do this kind of he said, she said format, but also keep it fun, lively, entertaining, find people who could bring the humor as well as insightful content at the same time, that would maybe be a cool thing to do.
And you did have some kind of scoring, right? Like somebody won each argument. Did you do that as well?
Not super seriously. We could have. I think we debated that. Why are you laughing, Jennifer?
Well, no, because we debated a lot of things.
We debated a lot of things. And we should talk about all the things we did debate, because it was an interesting conversation, right?
Well, and it was controversial, the actual panel, your feedback wasn't all smileys. A lot of people liked it. I liked it. I thought it was fascinating, but it was controversial, right?
Right. And that was one of the debates we had when we were planning this, and planning this with our two debate panelists was, do we want to keep this just a controversial topics? Do we want to mix it up? And we did decide early on, we wanted to tackle some controversial stuff. We didn't have time to, we had a long list of topics and questions that we distilled down. I think we had, what, Jennifer, 20, maybe 15?
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
And this panel went for how long?
20 minutes.
So it was a very short period of time. 20 questions. There was no way you were going to get through 20 questions.
No, I know. So, that was the challenge to do, which the flow of the questions, which topics to start with. We had those discussions, but also just back to the controversial thing, right? One of the decision points we had to make with Sanjay and Tina, the two panelists, was, do we ask them to purposely take opposing sides for everything? Because let's face it, it's not an interesting conversation if they agree with everyone on every topic, right?
I agree.
Yeah. So we chose some of the topics with that in mind, knowing that they had different viewpoints on them, but we were also very aware of, having that conversation. Do we force them to take a perspective that they may not personally believe in?
And what was your decision on that one? Jennifer, what did you guys decide?
Yeah, we had discussion on whether we wanted them to take on kind of a character or persona, or to represent themselves. And we went with, they would represent themselves. And there were things that they naturally agreed on and things that they naturally disagreed on. And so just played around with that. And then what we could fit in the timing. Because this was a risk, trying something new. And so that's why we put it in a short time frame, like 20 minutes, because if it didn't work, it was 20 minutes. But if it did work, maybe it comes back and maybe it gets a longer time the next time.
So how much pre-work did you actually do with the two panelists? So we had Sanjay Nath and Tina, I can never say her last name correctly. Varghese. They're both excellent speakers and they are very good humorists. So your selection, tell me a little bit about the selection of them and kind of how did you prepare them?
Yeah.
It was interesting because as we were talking, because they had to be members of the association and they had to be attending the convention when we were thinking about the selection. And we had a longer list of women that we thought could do well in the debate. And when we narrowed it down to choosing Tina, who was really the front runner in our selection, then we had to choose who on the male side we thought could handle Tina on stage.
I love that. Who can handle Tina? Because she's very forthright.
Feisty, right?
Feisty is a good word.
So we needed somebody feisty on the men's side.
Okay. So that's good to know about, kind of their personalities and their characters needed to complement each other, right? Versus be exactly the same.
Right.
Because I wouldn't call Sanjay feisty. I would call him
sarcastic is one of the I think the criteria we were also looking for. Both Tina and Sanjay can be very sarcastic. So bringing that kind of humor, a little bit of maybe edgy humor to it is what we wanted.
And sarcasm is really in my opinion, the hardest form of humor to really land. So the fact that you pick two pretty sarcastic people can kind of make that a little even more controversial. Was that intentional on your part?
I would say for sure. Yes, for sure. We wanted them to be outspoken, to not be afraid to say anything. And what was fun about the process in terms of planning this, because we worked with them to distill down the topics, the different questions, to get their feedback on, okay, which ones are you going to really disagree with? And what was fun about it in the weeks, and I don't know how long, Jennifer, a couple months leading up to it, is they started trash talking each other during the process of making this, and even the emails flying back and forth, right? They were insulting each other and trash talking each other. So we were loving that, right? We were like, yes, this is the energy we want to see on stage.
Awesome. Now, did you get a feeling though? I mean, part of the problem with preparing panelists too much is sometimes it feels like the better part of the panel occurred in the pre-work versus in actually on stage. So tell me a little bit about your experience of that preparation piece and then what actually happened on stage.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kristin, in terms of that over planning with panels. And I've had that experience where, the pre-call was better than what happened on stage and you wish you'd recorded it and could share it. In this case, it was pretty good. I mean, these are two people who like to perform. So they were very comfortable on stage. They did not script their responses. We talked about the types of things that we would be discussing, but we didn't work really hard on having them script it. We just talked to them about, which things did they agree on, which did they disagree. And so we were able to kind of whittle it down and narrow down the topics that way. But they seem very comfortable on stage, I think. Michael?
Yeah. And also we asked them what topics they got excited about, right? Because there were a few where they were kind of like, yeah, no, this doesn't get my crank, right? So let's not talk about that. In terms of preparation, though, I would say there was a bit of a contrast between Tina and Sanjay, in that Tina did say, she made it very clear she would think about her answers beforehand and probably write some bullet points and have a clear idea of what she was going to say than I think Sanjay, where Sanjay was just like, no, I'm just gonna improv this. I'm freewheeling this puppy in the moment. No planning beforehand.
Okay, so keeping it pretty high level in general, awesome. Kind of here are the potential questions, made sure that there was some compare and contrast, that they weren't, doing the dashboard dog to each other. So this is good. So let's talk about.
Oh, sorry. Kristin, can I just chime in with one more thought about the
no, you can't.
Topics? I can't.
Please.
One of the topics, or one of the ideas that we also mused about, because it was called He Said, She Said, and correct me, Jennifer, if I'm off base here, but because it was called He Said, She Said, we also kind of mulled around the idea of just keeping it to topics that were more gender-based, where it was topics where, okay, what does the male perspective look like on this topic versus the female professional speaker topic look like? So that was another one of our decision points that we kind of wrestled with, because that is, if you're going to call something He Said, She Said, that is an obvious thing you could also do, is keep all the topics related to those gender perspectives. And in this case, there were a few questions, like the opening question for sure, but
what was that opening question there?
The opening question was is it true that there were several studies showing that men are funnier than women? Is that true? And we thought that would be a good sort of debate hand grenade to start off with.
And I remember it lit up the audience. So that was a good starting question. Just for our listeners, what are some other questions that you asked them, just so that they kind of get a sense?
Oh, Jennifer.
Well,
do you remember some of the questions? I'm trying to remember some of the questions.
I remember one was about language. What words can women use on stage? What words can men use that women can't use? That kind of thing, if I remember correctly. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That was one. Yeah, that was one for sure.
And then we had some more profession focused questions as opposed to gender focused. So talking about speaking for free versus fee. And I'm trying to remember some others. I'm sorry, Kristin.
No, that's okay. So when they were answering some of these questions, were they putting their own male, female perspective on it if it wasn't already baked into the question?
I would say no, not necessarily, just more their personal experience as a speaker.
Okay. So that's excellent information about the planning. Now let's talk about the actual execution. Did it go the way that you had expected it to? What was the audience response? what's your impression of how it went? I mean, Michael, you were moderating. Jennifer, you were over on the wings going, I hope this works. I hope this works.
Do you want to start, Jennifer?
Well, I think that the first part was deciding on the moderator. So at first we were thinking we would have somebody else moderate, but Michael and I were so involved in the planning of it and the discussions of it that I think it was me who suggested, Michael, that you moderate it, that you would be, I think, the best suited for it, recognizing what we were trying to accomplish. And the work that we had done with Sanjay and Tina, I think, was important. So I think that decision was an important one. And
yes, that is an important one. And that's part of even the planning. But see, here's my perspective. For me, I'm like, of course it would be Michael Kerr. Of course, because you are the epitome of a fabulous host, MC. You're an amazing humorist. You have the gravitas in the industry. I mean, so I'm sorry, I didn't even, I know you. Yes, I'm talking about you.
Are you talking about me?
I didn't even,
well, thank you. That's
I didn't even
very kind
like,
of you.
because you were planning it and so integrated. It's like, oh, but it could have been somebody else.
For sure it could have. Tina and Sanjay, I think, were very much rooting for me as well and comfortable with me. So I think that's one of the components too. I think if you're one of the panelists, you want to be comfortable, obviously, with the moderator, right? You want to have some chemistry with them and a connection.
Well, especially if you're bringing up controversial questions.
For sure.
Right.
For sure. So my perspective from the moderator, and Jennifer knows this, because we have to talk about the good and the bad and the ugly. I was not happy with how I performed. I would love to have done a do-over on that one. So we had, we had all these different visions of what we wanted to do with the panel, and get the humor out there, get the sarcasm out there, make it controversial, make it edgy, make it fun. And partly, and that was very intentional too, in terms of just the message itself, right? That we need to be okay having difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we often, in any association, in any group, in any company, we all know we shy away from those difficult conversations. So we wanted to model perhaps an approach for making it fun and safe to have those difficult conversations. So I know from my perspective, I was challenged the whole time, and partly because I was in a dual role. I was also the convention co-chair there. So the whole time I'm thinking about timing. I'm thinking about the rest of the convention. We had started late with the panel. I knew we were behind time already. So, those things were floating through my head and just being totally candid and honest here. A little helpful tip for moderators out there: where I sat on the stage for the moderation, I had trouble hearing their answers very often because I was behind, and I should have, in retrospect, I think if I didn't have so much else going on in my brain, I would have just said, hold the presses, I'm going out front here into the front of the audience where I could gain control better of the room and hear them better. But I struggled hearing some of which makes it a little challenging sometimes to be an effective moderator, to ask those follow-up questions.
So for our audience here, you were actually standing on stage, right?
Yes, I was standing sort of we were kind of in a V, I guess, and I was a little bit behind them, standing
and behind
at
the
a
speakers.
cocktail.
Yeah.
But you weren't were you in the middle, or were you on the right-hand side?
I was in the middle, but a little closer to Sanjay.
Okay. Yeah. And because you were behind them, it was harder to hear.
Yes.
So being a little bit more forward.
The other thing that I wish that we didn't achieve in terms of a goal was, we had also, Jennifer and I talked about this vision of getting the audience more involved. So I had this vision of, like, I wanted the audience to boo when they disagreed with things, to cheer, to even stand up and applaud. And there was a little bit of that, but not a lot. I know there was one of our members in particular, every now and then he would yell out in a really loud voice, "Now that's funny," which I just loved. But I would have loved to have seen more engagement. And again, I think the time pressure was certainly working against our advantage here. but Jennifer was going to roam in the audience, and I would have loved to have had more time to take more questions. We did a little bit of that, but I would have loved to have had more questions and even get the audience to vote more on where they landed on these different topics. And so that was a challenge. And even when we asked for questions from the audience, right, I remember specifically asking for controversial, the more controversial, the better, right? Like, let's stir things up. Let's keep this edgy. And the first question we got was incredibly tame and incredibly not controversial.
Yeah, and that's the challenge of when you go into the audience, you're working without a net, you're working unscripted, Jennifer Spear, correct? And so, you kind of have to think through all of those things, and you had only 20 minutes. And, I just thought it was a lot of fun. And the panelists did a great job of keeping it engaging and interesting. And after all, it was only 20 minutes. But okay, so Jennifer, what did you particularly like about that panel? And do you have any do-overs that you would have done differently?
I mean, what I liked about it is that we did it, that we took that chance and that risk and put it out there, because it was a risk to do it. And so I'm really thrilled that we did it. I'm glad that Michael was moderating. I honestly can't imagine someone else doing it. He's a little more critical on his performance. I thought he was great in it, but it's recognizing all of those things that we just mentioned just now were all the things that happen in the moment. And so you have to be okay with some of those things, recognizing you can only plan so much. And then you don't know what your panelists are actually going to say. You can have sound issues. When you go into the audience, you have no idea what questions they're going to ask. And so it's being okay with being in that moment. And it really all was a bit of a chance we were taking, but I think it was well worth it. In terms of a do-over, it's more for the do next time, because I think what we did was good. But next time, I would want more time, recognizing that there are some really good discussions that we could have. If we wanted to get the audience more involved, we'd have to build that in, and that takes time. And so I think the next time, if we were to do it, I think we could do a bigger, better, faster version of it. It would be good.
I love debriefing and learning, so that the next time you want to do it, it gets even better. And I love the fact that you were willing to take a chance. I mean, a lot of meeting organizers, they work towards the smiley face on the evaluations. And I think sometimes we do our audiences a disservice if we're just catering to what they want to hear versus what they might need to hear.
Well, and Kristin, that was one of the questions. One of the questions was, do you think it's true that you haven't done your job as a professional speaker unless you've upset half of your audience, unless you've peed off half of your audience? And so that was one of the debate topics. And then interesting in terms of the feedback from the people that were upset, one of the recurring comments was, why would you want to purposely divide the audience like that? And I had to respond, well, that was kind of the point, actually. We wanted to show that there's more than one answer out there. There's more than one perspective on all sorts of different issues and topics. So that was the point.
That was the point. Okay, so given the fact that the feedback was kind of a love-hate relationship with this panel, let's just call it for what it is. I mean, I think the majority of people appreciated it, but of course, you've always got a couple of squeaky wheels in there. What's the overall organization's kind of take on this? It was kind of a risk, this kind of panel. I mean, were they, oh my God, we're never ever going to do that again? Or yeah, this was a good experiment. Like, what was the reaction in the post debrief? Because it has been several months.
Yeah, I'm thinking it was pretty positive in terms of the reaction. Because of the way we work as an association, you have different chairs for the convention each year. So it's going to be up to the individual chair whether they want to continue it or not. But I think the reaction to the experiment was quite positive.
Yeah, I think so too. We had a lot of support for it in terms of I think the board and the people around us on the convention. They were very, very supportive. And And that's a good point, right? I would hate to see when you try these new things. I hate the notion that that as we move forward, as different associations move forward with their events, that you try an event and it kind of didn't go 100% the way you wanted, so you discard it, right? I think that happens all too quickly, rather than saying, no, there was something there. Let's build on that. We started something good. Let's just make it even better next time, but don't throw it away just because there were a few bumps along the way.
And whenever you're trying some innovative format, it never goes completely smooth. Maybe it shouldn't go completely smooth because it's a trial run, right?
Right. It's
Yeah,
boring to go completely smooth. Who wants
right?
completely smooth?
That's where the learning comes from, for sure. I would say one of the criticisms that we received that I took in and accepted was because it was he said, she said, and is that being inclusive, right? And thinking about binary language, and so just even in that, were we alienating people before we even started by doing that? And it was thought of, it was talked about ahead of time, and we thought within the spirit of what we were doing, it would be accepted. So, but knowing that we could have made somebody or some people uncomfortable, I would be thinking about that more seriously for the next time.
That could have been a topic question, Jennifer.
There you go.
Well, okay, and on that note too, I was thinking as we were planning this, there's all sorts of different formats that you could do. A company could do this, and rather than he said, she said, they could do sales said, marketing said.
Right. Operations,
management said,
sure.
Employees said, right, and just split up into different camps. And I think the key though is if you do it in that spirit of fun, right? You get into good, hearty debates on some really interesting, even controversial topics, but you keep it light, you keep it in that spirit of fun. Then I think it's a great formula to open up some good conversations.
Excellent. That's an excellent wrap-up comment, Michael. Jennifer, a last comment from you for our podcast here.
Yeah, for me, it was a great learning, great experiment. And for Michael and I, everything that we did at the convention this past year was really focused on also providing opportunities for our members to learn, right? And to learn different things that they could do, different things that they could bring to their clients. So recognizing that this is a debate that you could set up, as Michael was saying, between management and staff and sales and marketing, but letting our members know that there's some other little tools they can put in their tool belt as they're talking to their clients.
Awesome. Well, I do appreciate you taking the time and energy to share this kind of neat, innovative format with our powerful panel listeners. So thanks so much. Appreciate you. And we'll see you at the next CAPS convention.
We will. Thank you, Kristin.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jennifer.